We are here today to talk about email marketing. My name's Amy. I work for Best Friends Animal Society. I live here in Austin. And at Best Friends, this is actually what I look like all day. I make that face like constantly. I manage all of our digital fundraising and our email marketing program at Best Friends. So I live in Austin. I've been here for a couple of years. Prior to that, I'm from Boston. And I used to work for the MSPCA Angel there, doing the same kind of stuff. So that's me. What are we doing here? So I want to talk about a few things. I think when people think about email, they think about like the messages themselves, right? And that's kind of it. But there's an overarching strategy that we have to be thinking about, right, when we're thinking about email. There's also, creating effective email messages themselves, and then there's measuring the actual results of what we're doing. And with anything, it's really like you create it, you have to go back and measure, to make sure that you're actually figuring out how well you did. A lot of times, we're all super, super busy. We create something, we send it out, we're like, great, I did it. We don't go back and actually see what our results look like. We really, really have to make the time to do that. So email is great, right? My boss loves to tell me that I'm free because when we look at how you can communicate with donors, the number one way that people like to stay in touch with charities is mail. Mail is expensive. You have to send it, you have to print it, you have to do all of these different things. Email, it's not totally free. You have to have an email service provider. You have to be paying for some software. There is somebody who's going to have to manage your program and do all this work. But for the most part, it's a really cost-effective way of staying in touch with people. And people like to stay in touch via email. 52% of donors say that that's their favorite way to stay in touch with charities. This other statistic, I love this one. So 27% of donors surveyed will share an email with like friends and family that they really like. So that's free, right? If you can have people share your messaging with a larger audience, you just expanded your audience by like 27% if you can make sure that that happens. So tip number one, always make sure that there is social sharing functionality in your emails. Any email provider is going to be able to let you do this. There's always like a little bit of code you can put in, and like sometimes it says like tell a friend, or you can include like social sharing icons and say like share on Facebook, share on Twitter, all that kind of stuff. So what do we need to do to get started? Actually, let's stop for a second. How many of you guys are currently sending email for an organization? Okay, awesome. And how many of you are looking to start brand new? Okay, cool. So we'll kind of cover the basics of what to do to start from scratch, but also I'm sure there will be good tips and tricks for everybody who's already doing this and wants to be able to just get better at it. And email isn't one of these things where you have solved it at any point. You're not, unfortunately, it's the sad realization, it's always something that you're testing, that you're trying new things, that you're trying to grow, the effectiveness of what you're doing. So there's always more to be done. So what do you need, right? You need something to send. You need to figure out what types of content you're going to send out to your list. You need a list, right? You need people to actually send it to, and a way to send it, and then people to actually do the work, right? And that's all of us. So these are kind of the four components. We're going to talk about these. What are you going to send? These are, I would say, the most common types of email communications that we send in animal welfare. I'm curious if there's other types of things that people are sending or interested in sending, but newsletters. Is anybody sending a newsletter right now to their list? How often do you do it? Quarterly? What about you? Quarterly, awesome. Do you actually do it every quarter? Quarterly is pretty good. If you can consistently get something out quarterly, that's fantastic. The tough thing with newsletters, and I've done this myself, is you will have a schedule. You'll be like, okay, we're going to do it every month. And then March comes around and you're super busy and you're like, I have to get it out. And then you don't. That's tough. So if you're going to do a newsletter, you need to pick a schedule that works for you that you can actually stick to and support. At Best Friends, we do a newsletter every other week. It's a lot of work. I'm not going to lie about that. Fundraising appeals. Is anybody sending out fundraising appeals? You guys are my people. Fundraising appeals are fantastic in email. If there is one thing that you can do this year, I would encourage everybody to send out a fundraising email around the holidays. In the digital world, the last day of the year is the single biggest fundraising day. It's because people procrastinate. So they wait until the very last day of the year and they make their gift to get their tax deduction for the year, right? It's human nature. Everybody does it. It happens in every organization. So if you can get out one fundraising email, December 31st is your day. At Best Friends, we send out a lot of different fundraising appeals over the course of the year. You know, when you think about the types, the frequency of that kind of stuff, it's really like a your mileage may vary kind of situation. You know, like you kind of have to feel out what the appropriate amount is for your audience. Events, you know, certainly events, like if you've got an event coming up, that's a great thing to share in email. Whether it's encouraging people to buy a ticket for the event, if it's an adoption promotion, if that's an event, you know, like you can encourage people to go check out, you know, available animals or, you know, share all that kind of stuff. And welcome series, that's a little bit more of like a complicated thing to do, but really, really awesome because most email programs are going to let you set up a welcome series so that like somebody comes onto your list, maybe they come to your website and they sign up and it will automatically send them a few emails. And that's really nice because, you know, they're instantly greeted, you know, by you. You can tell them about your organization. You can offer them other opportunities to engage with you. So that might be like, hey, watch this cool video about what we do, follow us on Facebook, donate to us, all these kinds of things. So I think it's really important for everybody to kind of map out the types of content that you're going to send out and have that be your framework, right? So if somebody says, like this has happened to everybody, I'm sure. Somebody comes to you and says, I have this great idea. Let's send an email to everybody we have about this one thing that's really important to me personally, right? You can look at your email content strategy and say, does this fit in with the types of communications that we send out? And if it doesn't, email may not be the right place for that message to go out. I give everybody permission to say no if you feel like the email program is not the right way to convey a certain message. But I would encourage everybody to try and find other alternatives for people who come to you and say like, hey, I want to send this message out to everybody that we've ever had on our list. And you're like, not so much, I think what we want to do. But maybe that's an opportunity for a social media post. Maybe it's an opportunity for a story on the website. Like look at the different digital channels and see what might work best. No, but is a lot better than no. So this is like the most important thing. Every email that you send out, and I've seen like the biggest of organizations, the biggest of companies make this mistake. Every email that you send out should have one and only one goal, and that goal should ideally be measurable, right? So we are all super busy. Everybody has too much email like to get through, right? Like when you go and look in your inbox, like you're scrolling, you're like, what am I supposed to do? What's the priority? Like, you know, can I just delete half of this stuff? And the answer is usually yes, you know. But you need to make sure that everything has one single goal. If like this is not even like an email marketing thing, but like somebody told me years ago, if you send an email to one of your colleagues and you ask them 3 questions, they're going to reply to 1. And you're gonna be like, but I needed 3 things. People don't, we just can't, like our brains don't work that way. Like you can manage one thing. So the question that I always ask is like, tell me what you want me to do. Like you just sent me this email, tell me what you want me to do in this email. Do you want me to give you a donation? Do you want me to buy a ticket? Don't be shy about it. Make it really easy. Think about it in terms of just like making it easy for people in the crowded inbox space that we're all living in to figure out what it is that you need them to do in this instance. So for newsletters, you know, there's going to be a lot of stories in your newsletters, but usually it's a drive to a website, right? Like our newsletters serve the purpose of driving traffic to our website. So we give little snippets about stories. We don't tell the entire story because nobody's got time to read all of that. But you read the little snippets and you go to the website to learn more, right? Fundraising appeals, I mean, that's obvious. You ask people to donate and you don't ever ask them to do anything else in those emails, by the way. You want to really stay focused on that. Event registration, right? Like click here, sign up, click here to buy a ticket. I mean, a lot of this stuff is kind of, it seems really obvious, but people make this mistake all the time. We try and cram too much stuff into an email. So one goal per email, make it really clear. And that goal, we call it a call to action, right? So I mean, like just to sort of reiterate the point, a lot of times you'll see a button in an email and the button is the call to action. So I'm a big fan of buttons. Buttons are easy. You know, you see the big honking button in your email and you're like, yes, I press. What do I do with the button? I press it. So, you know, there's always one. These are just some examples of call to actions, right? Like, you know, take a survey, donate now, learn more, buy something. Here's a couple of examples. So these are 2 donation emails. This is one that we actually sent out at year end with the cutest dog ever. And then this is one that I had that the Nature Conservancy sent. Pro tip, by the way, sign up for everybody's email list. like everybody that you can think of, every organization you can think of, brands you like. And when you get stumped and you're like, man, what should I do? You know, like, does this email, is it hitting the mark? Go look at what other people are doing. I mean, like, there's no shame, you know, in like checking out what other people are doing. And it just kind of helps as a sanity check, you know, like, am I hitting the mark? And also seeing what other people are doing and if that's something that's interesting that you might want to try. So the Nature Conservancy, you know, I've signed up for their mailing list and get all their emails. So these are both fundraising emails, right? There's a big honking button in both of them. This one we sent out on the last day of the year, so we did Last Chance, Give to the Animals in 2014. Nature Conservancy did Give Now. There's multiple variations of what you can put on a donate button. You can do Give Now, Donate Today, all these things. The optimal thing to do is actually test all of those messages. That's a time-consuming process for everybody, but that's how you would determine the best language on your button. There's one tip I want to mention in these emails. If you notice in both of them, we both use orange. There's a button and then there's actually a text link too. So I guess there's a pointer on here, but I don't know how to use it. But the text link right here, please consider making one last gift. They go to the same place. But the reason why most people will have a text link and a button, does anybody, like, I mean, everybody here reads mail on their phone, right? So if you read mail on your phone, a lot of people don't have images enabled. And so when you don't have images enabled, those buttons aren't going to show up immediately. So some people are going to skim that email and not ever turn on images if they're not actually interested in it. If you have a text link, then they have a way, if there's no images turned on, to be able to click through. So it's like a good backup thing to do, to have them both. But yeah, in these fundraising emails, you'll see the Nature Conservancy's actually got like 1, 2, 3, like 4 text links, 2 buttons, and they are all going to the exact same place. It's just multiple ways to do the same thing. Here's another example. So the goal of this email, this was actually a Heifer International email that they sent out around Valentine's Day. And Heifer does it's more like, you know, they talk about like, you know, like buying a goat, you know, for somebody, you know, as a gift. It's a donation, but they're using the word shop here, right? You're going to buy a heifer gift. I goat you, babe. And they did the exact same thing. They've actually got the text link and the image link, but it's really clear what you're doing here, right? Like you're not coming and like, I'm supposed to make a donation and also you want me to go to this event and also you want me to take a survey. It's one thing. Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is one of my favorite pictures ever. I've actually had it as my desktop background on my computer for ages because it cracks me up every time I see it. But I mean, let's talk about like tips for great content in an email, right? Like you want to send useful information. If you don't have something to say, you have no business sending anybody an email. So really, like if you have this sense of like, oh, I should send out an email, and ideally, like animal welfare organizations, well, there's a stat I'll show you in a little bit, but you know, you want to stay in touch with people, ideally like once a month. But if you don't have anything to say that month, don't send an email. I mean, like we all have overcrowded inboxes. If you make sure that there's something useful there for people, don't, you know, make sure you're thinking about your audience and like what they need and what they would want to be seeing from you. So I encourage everybody to show your personality, right? Like we don't have to be, you know, like these are the facts, do this, like, you know, be fun, you know, like if that's your personality. But I mean, we've got great pictures like this dog. Like how can you write like a boring, you know, email when you've got a picture of that dog? You know what I mean? So keep it, you know, keep a lot of personality, keep it short. You know, one of the things, if you ever get an email that's like 5 big paragraphs long, you know that nobody's gonna have the time to read through that, right? So try and keep your emails short. I won't give you like a word count as to what you should have. Well, maybe I will, you know, 300 words or so. But if you've got more to say, then use more words. I mean, like don't get trapped by the constraints of, you know, some of these numbers. If you've got something that you need to get across, make sure you do it. But, you know, keep in mind that people are going to skim your email. They're not going to necessarily sit there and read all of it. So you need to make sure that you're getting like the points across that you need to, and that it's easy to skim. White space is good. Bullet points are good. All these things, right? Just make it easy for people. Make it easy to take an action. And please, 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 please proofread. I can't tell you how many times I've sent out an email in my life and immediately seen the error right after I send it. Okay, mobile-friendly messages. So we talked a little bit earlier about how many of us read our messages on our phone, right? So make sure it's easy to read your emails on the phone. You can have actual mobile layouts constructed in your email program that will display for mobile devices. It's work, I'm not gonna lie. Like you'd have 2 different versions for people who are opening your message on your desktop versus on your mobile phone. But really the best thing that you can do is it's following the same tips that we just talked about. It's good, concise content, make it easy to read. If you're linking to something else, think about the fact that like I'm reading this on my phone. If you ask me to donate, please send me to a donation form that shows up nicely on my phone and isn't like this big thing where I have to scroll in and try and like do all these radio buttons and stuff. So ideally you should be linking to mobile optimized forms as well. And test on mobile devices before you send out a message, see what it looks like on your phone, so you know if it's a total travesty or if there's like some modifications that you can make that will just make it look a little bit easier. 48% of emails are opened on a mobile device, so this is a big deal. I mean, like this wasn't a number of years ago, this was not a concern, but this is becoming more and more of a thing that we all need to be thinking about. And like I mentioned earlier, images are fine for mobile, but just don't rely on them. So having that text link is a really great way to ensure that there's options in case people don't have their images turned on. Hello? Oh, subject lines. Okay, so 33% of email recipients will open an email based on subject line alone. I actually feel like that statistic is low, right? Because you're going to get the message, and think of it, it's an envelope, right? Like you want your name or a recognizable name from your organization as the sender. At Best Friends, almost every single thing that we send out is from Best Friends Animal Society. But if you have like a big name in your organization that people are going to recognize, like sometimes AP will send emails from Ellen Jefferson. I know who Ellen is. So if I see an email from her, I'm going to open it. But make sure that there's that name recognition, right, if you're going to be using them. But subject lines are like, it's kind of your one chance, right, to get them to open the message or not. So it's a really big deal. And I've heard people say that you should actually spend as much time writing the content of your email as you do the subject line. And Elizabeth is totally giving me a skeptical look because her team actually writes all of our emails at Best Friends. But I think the point is it's really important. And for everybody who's ever written a paper in school, the last thing you do is write the title. And you're like, oh, seriously, I hate the title. And you dash off something at the last minute. I had one class in college where I was so frustrated by this that I named every one of my papers from a Duran Duran lyric. But you need to focus on this. Like you really need to spend some time writing subject lines. When I have to write a subject line, I will brainstorm and dash off like as many terrible subject lines as I can think of. And then at the end I stop and I say like, okay, what do I have? And sometimes there's a couple options that I'm like, okay, these look all right. I also will sometimes mine the content of the email itself looking for like those really great juicy phrases. So subject lines, keep them short, under 50 characters, definitely. Think about like when you open your mail program, there's only so many characters that you can see. And also people they stop reading after a couple of words. So get the important part of the message up front. Personalization is great. You, your, we, locations, so like we need your help in Austin. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, oh, they know who I am. They know I live in Austin. They're talking to me, you, your. There's also personalization that you can use. And this is one of these things, it's a little bit of a gimmick, so you want to be careful about using it too much, but you can put people's first names in subject lines. And that's one of those things that works sometimes, but if you do it every single time, it gets really old. So, like, Amy, we need your help in Austin this week. That's cool once in a while, but if every single time that you're emailing me, it's Amy, there's an adoption event this week. Amy, we need your support. It gets old. So that's one of those things that you just want to use in like limited capacity. Always avoid salesman-like language, like free cats. I don't think anybody's going to use that, but you actually have to be careful about this because of spam filters. If spam filters are kind of a complicated thing. It's not super consistent across the board. Every email server has a different set of spam requirements, but they all kind of bubble up to the same thing. Don't sound like the email might be a scam, right? Always, always, always be honest about what you're sending, right? You can be a little bit quirky. In fact, quirky is often good, we find, in subject lines. it can be a little bit clickbaity, right? Like, oh, I really want to know what that is, but it has to be honest. Don't deceive people. Don't try and like get one over, be creative, but try to avoid being too kind of salesy. Active words are good, and testing is good. Has anybody ever done like any A/B testing on their emails? Awesome. A/B testing is where you're basically saying, I'm going to test message 1 versus message 2 and see which one does better. Subject lines are like the easiest thing to test because it's just one line that's different in each one, and you can test different concepts. So you might want to test the concept of like a very urgent subject line versus a more passive one, or testing out that personalization to see how that works. You can do all kinds of stuff to find out what subject lines work best in your organization. So these are actually some examples that I grabbed. These were from end-of-year emails, and these were ones that performed really well. These are not from Best Friends. This is like a survey of nonprofit organizations. So the first one's actually kind of long, but it was a very special video for you from the animals at, and actually I forgot which organization sent me this, but I like it's a very special video for you, right? Still looking for gift ideas for your family? Like that's action-oriented toward the person who's receiving it. Like, yes, I actually am looking for more gift options, right? So it's helping to serve the need of what the person receiving it is versus so much about yourself, This is an example of that personalization. Amy, your donation will change lives. 8 incredible things you've done this year. You can use numbers and subject lines. Don't go crazy with them. But everybody loves lists, so that's kind of a nice thing. And it's not too late to help. That's like the sense of urgency. You can do something right now. So what this all kind of bubbles up to is, I feel like the biggest thing about email, I think I've said that like 3 times, but there's a lot of big things, is it's about building trust, right? So use your branding and your voice. Make your emails consistent with everything else that you do. In every single email that you send out, you should have your business's logo, your organization's logo in the top left corner, so that when people open it, they immediately say like, oh, hey, this is an email from Best Friends. I know what I'm reading. You don't want them to have to hunt and be like, what is this? Like, who did I receive this from? You want it to be consistent in terms of your brand, your colors, your images, your logo, all that kind of stuff. You want to say who you are, using a consistent from line like we talked about, personalizing your message to the biggest extent that you can, making your point clear, send relevant information, include a way to reach you. I hate it when I get an email from somebody and I can't find a way to communicate back with them if there's something that's wrong. So at Best Friends, if you reply to one of our emails, you will get a person who will receive that email and they will get back to you. And I think that's a big part of building trust, right? People want to know that it's a two-way communication street, that they can actually, if they've got a question, if they've got an issue, if they've got a concern, there's another like human being on the other end who will reply to them and help them. So that's really important. I know, we're all super strapped for time. It's hard to say like, I'm going to carve out time to respond to emails, but it's a really important thing. And I have to tell you, like that opportunity to actually talk one-on-one with people can be invaluable. So sometimes if somebody emails and they've got a concern or a question, like you've now entered in a one-on-one conversation with them, they're going to be that much more engaged with you. So use a real from address and test. Things not to do, right? Don't have a misleading subject line. Don't forget an unsubscribe link. That's actually the law. Like you need to have an unsubscribe link in every email that you send out. And that's why it's so important that we all need to have email service providers. We'll talk about some examples of email service providers that are affordable and easy to kind of start up. But you have to have a way for people to unsubscribe. If they don't want to receive messages from you anymore, it's the law. It's can't spam law that we have to be able to give them an option to say no more communication. Don't use spammy words. Don't use excessive punctuation. I know everybody loves exclamation points, but I would encourage everyone to limit themselves to maybe 1 exclamation point per email. It's hard. Don't use red fonts or a ton of colored fonts. You can use colored fonts a little bit, but it's one of those things that actually triggers spam filters if you've got too many crazy colors. And the reason for that is that there's some sort of like scammy things that people will have done in the past. I think everybody's hopefully kind of over this these days, but they'll make like, have like a blue background and then have blue text on top of it to put in like all these words that will hopefully get around the spam filter. So it's just kind of a thing you have to be careful of. And try not to use sloppy HTML. If you have, in my previous lives, we had old email templates that had been hanging out for years and years and years. And if you ever look at the code on those old email templates and there's just a ton of junk, like email filters, spam filters will trigger off of that. I think that it might be kind of deceptive. So try and have clean code. Scheduling. Okay, so the average number of emails per month that animal organizations send out is 4, but do not feel, like I said, about that you have to send out 4 a month. If 1 a month is good for you, do that. If if twice a week is good for you, you can do that. The recommendation, I do recommend that you try to send out an email once a month as a reminder that people signed up to your list. I have definitely signed up for email lists, and then around Christmas, I won't hear from somebody for like 6 months, and then around Christmas time, they're just all over you, and you're like, when did I sign up? Seriously, for Banana Republic? Why are you suddenly bombing me? Actually, that's not true. Banana Republic emails relentlessly all the time, but they have great coupons. So you want to make sure that you're staying in touch, and just, there's that constant touch point. But again, if you don't have anything to say, skip a month. Oh, and watch your unsubscribes. In your email program, you'll be able to see, you're going to lose people for every email that you send. That's just part of the deal. It's usually not personal. Please know that. Like, there's nothing worse. You have to kind of like psych yourself up to go look at your unsubscribes and be like, okay, what did I do? But for the most part, like when I look at our unsubscribes, it's generally people saying like, I get too much email. I'm trying to pare down. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever done the like, where you go through and you're just like, I'm over it, and you go through and you unsubscribe from like 30 emails all at once. I mean, people do that. People get overwhelmed with all the communications that they get. So, you're going to lose a certain number of people for every email, but you'll start to notice that there's a standard amount that you lose, right? So that might be 10. That might be, if you have a big list, it might be 100. But you'll get that feel for like what the average is. And so if you see one that like skyrockets, it's like 4 times the number of unsubscribes you had before, that's a red flag. Like, what happened? Did I send the wrong message to the wrong people? Did I do something like totally not cool with those people? Did I send too many emails over the same period of time so they got sick of me? You do want to keep an eye out for that kind of stuff. Okay, everybody always asks what's the best day of the week and the best time of day to send an email, right? I like this chart. Do not trust this chart, right? These are like the aggregate days of the week, like when fundraising appeals work the best. The fact of the matter is this data, it's an aggregate. So it doesn't actually tell you anything about you and your organization personally. Unfortunately, the only way to figure out the best time and day to send your messages is through extensive testing. And I mean like extensive testing, like trying every day of the week, trying every hour of every day. Not a lot of us have the resources to do that. We don't have the resources to do that at Best Friends. That's like the sort of thing that like giant corporations can really, really hone down. I will say, for us, we do see a couple of peaks in the day. And you think about like when you read email, first thing in the morning, maybe when you get home from work. So if you wanted to try it out and try and figure out like the right timing, those are safe options to try, but it really is a matter of testing. So don't labor over this. Don't like spend all of your time worrying about like when's the actual optimal time. I do think weekdays tend to be a little bit safer than weekends, but again, like there's no magic bullet here. I can't tell you like Tuesdays at 3 p.m. are the best time to send emails. Send all of your emails then. It is interesting though, because there are definitely organizations that do that, because sometimes if you sign up for enough mailing lists, you will get clusters of emails along the same types of schedules. So bottom line, I mean, do what works best for you guys. If you can do some testing, that's awesome, but don't lose sleep over this. This is not the most important thing for you to be worrying about. Okay, so you have awesome emails. Who are you going to send them to? There are a lot of audiences that we have in animal welfare. And I think it's really important for us to be able to distinguish between them to the best of our abilities. And in email marketing programs, you'll be able to start to cluster people based on their interests if you're careful about making sure that you do that, right? So donors, we always want to know who our donors are, if at all possible. Adopters, right? We want to know who's been adopting animals from us. Volunteers, advocates, if you have an advocacy part of your organization. There's lots of different places that you can get email addresses from, and lots of different audiences you have to make sure you're catering to, right? I mean, we send out messages because we think this is what I as a, we as an organization need to get out. You need to be thinking about what these people as your audiences need and what they're going to be interested in. Building an email list is a really important thing, right? Starting from zero is super, super daunting, but there's lots of ways to start collecting email addresses. So if everybody here has a website, I would encourage you, first thing, to add a sign up, form onto your website. When people come to your website, they're there, they're reading stuff. You want them to be able to get more information from you, right? You want them to sign up and say, yeah, I want to receive my quarterly newsletter. I want to receive stories about animals. I want to receive whatever it is, right? You can kind of create a value proposition around that. So get that sign up button tomorrow. You can also add, there's loads of places you can collect email addresses from. Adoption applications. If you're doing direct mail, is anybody doing direct mail? Okay, sweet. You can put a line on there to get people's email addresses. Events are great opportunities to collect email addresses. If you have a photo booth, you can get email addresses from that. If you're doing on-site adoptions, get the email address as part of that process. There's just a million different places that you can gather email addresses from. And this is kind of an ongoing hustle that you have to be doing because you're always going to be losing people on your email list. Like we talked about, there's always going to be the unsubscribes. There's always going to be people who their email addresses, they delete their account or whatever, if it's a work account especially. There's always going to be this sense of attrition, so you have to be battling the attrition and trying to get new email addresses. Social media is a great way to get new email addresses. If anybody saw Melissa's presentation earlier, there's actually a new thing on Facebook where you can add a sign-up button and you can have people sign up for your email list. And then adding sharing options to your messages. That's awesome because if people share their messages out with other people, then they're going to be inclined, maybe, to sign up for your email list too so they can get more messages. So building an email list is really important. These are not ways to build an email list. Do not buy email lists. Do not take email addresses from anywhere. Don't go to other people's websites and take email addresses from them. Don't trade lists with other organizations unless you actually have in your business guidelines, right, that you are a partner with another organization. Every email address you have has to be opted in to receive email messages from you. It's the law, and it's also just best practices. Don't send stuff to people who don't want to hear from you. They're not going to be interested in what you send them. So sometimes we get these stars in our eyes around we have to have the biggest list ever. We have to have so many people. Quality is better than quantity, right? So if you have a smaller list of super engaged people, focus on them. Don't worry about trying to scrape websites and get email addresses through nefarious means. And this is a big thing too. If people don't know how they got on your mailing list, they're going to report you as spam. And if enough people report you as spam, a lot of mail servers will stop delivering your messages. So this is kind of a big deal. If we start sending to all these people on Gmail who don't know how they got on our list, they're all going to start flagging us as spam, and Gmail may not be interested in sending our messages anymore because we don't have a great reputation. So sender reputation is a big deal. We talked a little bit about this, can't spam, it's the law. Every email has to have an unsubscribe option. You can't falsify who you are. You can't use lists acquired through illegal means. And the language around that is opt in and opt out, right? I opted in to receive messages from you. I opted out so that I don't receive messages from you anymore. We have to follow this. This is our one big legal rule. Okay, so if you're looking to find an email platform, I'm going to give you some suggestions. These are not endorsements. I'm not paid to promote these, by any means. But when you're looking at an email program, there's a couple things that you want to be thinking about, right? You want something that's easy to use. None of us want to sit there and suffer through another bit of software that we don't, know how to manage. You want to be able to manage multiple lists so that you can segment your audience when you get to that point. Even if you're not doing it today, you're going to want to get there at some point. You're going to want to be able to send a special email to people who just adopted from this event. You're going to want to be able to send a special email to people who have donated to your organization before. You want something that has analytics. Everything should have analytics. If it doesn't, then run screaming. Mobile support, like we talked about earlier, mobile support's really important, so you need to be able to make sure that those emails can render properly in mobile devices. Trusted sender reputation. Every email program these days is going to really manage this tightly. So there's going to be rules around, like, you can't upload a list, with a bunch of, email addresses that you purchased. There's going to be rules around that so that the email service provider can manage their sender reputation, which is good for everybody. And ideally, if you can have a tool that has integrated forms into it, that's going to allow you to do like the sign up on your website, like we talked about. You sign up, you're automatically on the email list. You make a donation, you're automatically on the email list. Having that stuff integrated saves you hours and frustration. And then you have to figure out what your budget is and what you can reasonably manage. Don't get something that's going to be more than you can devote your energy to. So a couple of great options. MailChimp is free if you have a small list. So if you're starting today, I really can't say enough good things about MailChimp because they will let you have up to 2,000 email addresses on your list, which if you're just starting out, that's going to be a good place to start. And they'll let you send 12,000 emails per month. So basically that means up to, can I do math? 6 emails per month. Nobody's going to be sending more than 6 emails per month if they're just starting out. So that's a great option. And then they scale from there. And most of these programs do that. They scale starting at like small lists up to bigger lists. So you can grow through that program. But I mean, like up to 10,000 addresses, it's $15 a month. You send out one fundraising email a year, you're done. You know what I mean? Like you've covered your costs. They've also got sign-up forms, list segmentation, all this stuff. Constant Contact's also a great idea. They're a little bit pricier, but they're really reputable. They're really trusted. They've got a lot of that great same functionality. They've got a little bit more stuff. And they actually integrate with a fundraising tool that Network for Good has. So that's kind of a great solution for like the full integrated product. And then these are a couple other options that are kind of starting to get more advanced. BlueState Digital, we actually use that at Best Friends. They start off with it's a more expensive offering, but they have way more tools. So they've got event registration, advocacy, custom domains, all kinds of stuff in with that. So that may be a solution if you're growing your program. And then BlackBot actually has a newer product, and I don't know too much about it yet because it's still super new. But if you have like Razor's Edge or something, that's actually a good option to check out. And there's a million more. These are not the only ones, but if you need a place to start, I would encourage anybody to check these out. And I put the links on here so that when you look at the presentations online, you can just grab those. All right, metrics. How do you know if you're successful? These are the 4 key metrics for measuring an email. You've got open rates, you've got click-through rates, conversions, and unsubscribes. Everybody likes the open rates. That's the easiest one, right? Like how many people actually opened your message. Average open rate for animal welfare is about 13%. Every time I tell that to somebody that I work with who doesn't understand email, they're horrified. They're like, how can that be 13%? 13% is pretty decent. You have to think about like that overall inbox, right? And all of the stuff that's coming in. Who's actually going to stop and read your messages? So 13%. Keep that in mind when you're setting your expectations for yourself. So one of the things that you always want to test for is trying to get that bigger open, right? So that's great if you get a lot of people to open your message, but the click-through rate is actually, and the conversion rate are actually kind of the things that are the most important. How many people actually took the action that you asked them to take? So if I send out a fundraising email, and let's say 10% of the people on the list opened it, if only 0.2% of them donated, that's really my key metric, right? So I can understand that that's what I'm going to be looking at. That's what I should expect. That's what I can test to try and improve. So you have to look at these, all together. Open rates on themselves don't really do a whole lot because, you've actually got to test for the goal that you've asked people to, the thing that you've asked people to do. And then unsubscribes, we talked about this. People are going to unsubscribe for every single message that you send out. Don't feel too sad. It's always kind of a bummer, but just keep an eye on it and look out for peaks on that. So again, these are average industry benchmarks for animal welfare. Open rates 13%, click-through rates super low, right? 0.42. But this is what you should expect. And response rates, that's the actual conversion, like 0.07. And that will vary again, like for your particular organization for the type of message that you're sending out. For example, if we send out a message asking people to take a survey, we're going to get completely different conversion rates than if I ask people to please make a donation today. So keep in mind you're going to see different sorts of statistics based on the messages you send. Everybody's different. You just constantly have to be measuring and figuring out what's typical for you. So those are the key measurements. If that's all you have time for, focus on that stuff. If you can do some more advanced stuff, I would encourage just to start testing around times and dates we talked about, what subject lines work best, what messaging works best. You can test buttons, you can test copy, you can test like anything that you can think of. I will just encourage you that if you're testing, test only one thing at a time. Isolate your variable, right? Like if you're testing two completely different stories, like a story about a dog and a story about a cat, and then you also are testing a donate now versus a give today button, and you're also testing a subject line, you don't know what made the difference, right? So only test one thing. You can really only isolate that one thing and figure out what the impact actually is. So I think we have a few more minutes for questions if anybody has any.